Hi, Olivia. Mrs. Harbor, of course, and just trying to catch you up a little bit on the tundra. The tundra is in the very top of northern Canada. At least that's the part of the tundra we're talking about. There's also tundras in other areas, like the top, I think, of Russia, I think has the tundra. But we're just talking about the North American tundra up in the top of Canada. And it's a place that in the wintertime it gets very little sunlight, and in the summertime it gets very little nighttime. And the reason for that is because the earth is, it doesn't sit just straight, it sits a little bit crooked like that. And the angle of the sun doesn't hit in the correct way. It hits so that it's very cold in the North Pole, up in Santa Claus land. It's cold up there. And so, and nobody lives there. For one thing, the tundra has permanently frozen ground. It's called permafrost. And so you need to know that for your test. It's permanently frozen ground. In other words, the ground, you cannot dig with a shovel in the ground. Just like it'd be like you trying to dig, go out on a highway and trying to dig through the concrete or through the asphalt. You cannot do it. It's too hard. Well, the same thing with the tundra, except it's just frozen ground. So it's frozen like ice cubes, like trying to dig through a gigantic piece of ice. So because there's no way to do that, there's also no way for them to build roads. There's no way for them to have houses because you cannot build on a piece of on ice. You can't build on ice because it will sooner or later melt and your house will all topple down. And you probably know, the wise man that built his house on the rock and it stood firm. But you remember the story about the wise man? He built his house on the sand and the rains came down, the floods came up, the rains came down, and the house went, it smashed because you cannot build, you have to have a firm foundation. And it happens in second grade all the time when it comes to reading. If you don't have good reading skills in first grade and you haven't been taught phonics, how to attack a word, then you end up in second grade not really knowing how to read. And you really need to go back to first grade and learn it all over again. So the foundation is absolutely important. And of course, our foundation is Jesus Christ. So we are firm. We're built on him. We have a firm foundation because Jesus Christ never changes. In the tundra, because there's permafrost, there are no houses, there are no people, there's no roads, you can't even get there. And so the tundra is a place where there aren't any people. It's bursy, coldsy. In the wintertime, it is so frozen that nobody can live there. But there are some Inuit Indians. They're kind of like, we call them Eskimos. There's some Eskimos that actually can live there, and they live in like little ice huts made out of ice cubes. They're made out of blocks of snow. And they can survive. But most of us cannot survive in that land. So when you go to the tundra, you don't find anything. You don't find any plants. You don't find any trees. There's just pretty much flat land for as far as you can see. There's no hills. There's no mountains. It's just flat land. So we talked about that, and we drew a picture, and we drew some little icicles on the word tundra. We drew some icicles because the tundra is an icy place. Then we also drew a picture of a saguaro cactus, and I'll show you the pictures on the board in a minute. But the saguaro cactus is the cactus that it goes like, oh yeah, well anyway, it's a saguaro cactus. Let me see if I can draw a quick one here for you. It looks something like that. Okay. And we drew a Santa Claus hat on the top of him, just to remind us that the tundra is it's actually a cold desert. Here, there's our weird little Santa Claus hat we drew on top. Okay. Just to remind us, it's a cold desert. It doesn't rain in the tundra, very little rain. But most of our deserts are hot. But this is a cold desert. So in our second picture, we drew a picture of the saguaro cactus, and then we put a Santa Claus hat on just to remind us that, in the tundra, it's icy, it's bursy, it's freezing, and it does not rain. In the summertime, however, there is lots of sunshine and lots of sunlight, and it hardly ever gets dark because the earth is not straight, the earth is tipped, and because of the angle of the sun, it doesn't get dark. It gets very little nighttime. And so there's sunshine out, almost maybe 22 hours out of the day. There's sunshine. And of course, you know when sunshine is on an ice cube, what happens? You're right, it melts. So when Mr. Sunshine is shining on the tundra, on the permafrost, that permanently frozen ground, it's constantly melting the ground. But the water can't run away because it's frozen underneath. So the water is stuck. It can't go anywhere. Yes, some of it does evaporate, but mostly it just makes a big gigantic puddle, a puddle of water. So if you go to the tundra in the summertime, there's just like water everywhere. Puddles of water here, pumps of water there. There's just puddles of water absolutely everywhere. So you can't even walk through it. I mean, it's like walking through slush all over. If you could get there, it wouldn't be very pleasant. Because you have so much water. So the tundra is full of water in the summertime. Well, that doesn't seem so bad, but guess what? Yep, you guessed it. Bugs. Mrs. Mosquito and Mrs. Blackfly decide that it is an awesome thing to lay their eggs in the water or beside the water. And because there's so much water, they can lay a bazillion eggs. And all of those eggs hatch. They hatch into mosquitoes, and you know about mosquitoes. They bite you, and then they itch, okay? And the black flies, they also bite. They don't have a stinger like a nose like a mosquito, but they just take a chunk out of you. And we do have black flies here in Spokane. At least one time I know we had them. And they came, and the kids were out playing at recess in the springtime in May. And they came in, and on the corner of their neck, right where your hair meets your neck, right here, they would have this trickle of blood. And it was because the black flies had flown in, and they were biting the kids. And probably for a week or maybe a week and a half or two, we had to play in the gym, even though it was beautiful weather outside. But the black flies were everywhere, and it was not good. So no one likes black flies, and no one likes mosquitoes. And they're everywhere in the summertime in the tundra. So it is not a good place to visit. It is not a nice place because there's too many bugs. And then we talked a little bit about, there's a little tiny plant. It's about maybe an inch and a half. And it's called sedge. And it grows everywhere. It's kind of like moss. It's not very tall, and it kind of has a bloom. And sometimes when it blooms, it's maybe yellow, or maybe it's kind of a whitish color. And it's one of the few plants that can grow, and it doesn't have deep roots because remember, it's permanently frozen ground, so the roots can't grow down. So the roots go this way, they grow sideways, and the sedge it's absolutely everywhere. And of course in the wintertime it dies, but in the springtime the sedge grows. And guess what animal loves to eat sedge? Mr. Reindeer. You guessed it. Mr. Reindeer, Santa Claus's reindeer? Well, okay. They love sedge. And they'll come and they'll eat and they'll graze, and they think it's wonderful because sedge tastes different than what they normally eat. And so, to them, it is like, this is just really a tasty little thing, this tasty little plant. It was so nice that the Lord created it for me. And Mr. Reindeer, he just munches away on the sedge. But that's about the only plant that really grows very much, because plants have to have soil and they have to have deep root, a place for the roots to grow. Well, there's no place. Roots can't grow through ice. So the things in the tundra you need to remember, it's permanently frozen ground. It's called permafrost. It's in northern Canada. You need to know that one of the animals that does love the tundra is the reindeer. You need to know that it is a desert, and it's a cold desert. So lots of icicles, lots of snow in the wintertime, snow, and snow. You need to know that in the springtime, the permafrost melts a little bit, and it causes puddles because the water can't drain away, so it causes puddles. And then the mosquitoes and the black flies, those mommies lay eggs all over. And in the summertime, there are black flies and mosquitoes every which way. You need to know there are no roads and there are no houses, because to have a road or have a house, you have to have solid, firm ground. You cannot build on ice. You have to have a solid piece of land, like ground, like dirt. So it doesn't happen. There's dirt, but it's all messed up with the permanently frozen ground, the permafrost. So those are the things we discussed today in our science. And the kids are coming back in just a minute to go home. And so anyway, I'll send this to you. And probably, I think I have to send it on YouTube. I'll check that out. Anyway, I hope you're feeling better and back in school before too long. Okay, bye, baby.